Okay, let's dive right into this. We all have this picture in our heads of how our brains age. It's kind of this slow, gradual thing that, maybe gets a little noticeable once we hit our 60s. But what if that entire picture is just plain wrong? We're going to get into the science that suggests this whole process starts much, much earlier than any of us really think.
Right. We tend to think of brain aging like falling off a cliff. One day you're fine, the next day, boom, you're forgetting where you put your keys. But the latest neuroscience tells a completely different story. It's not a cliff at all. It's more like a long, slow, and for the most part, completely invisible ramp that starts decades before we notice a single thing.
And scientists actually have a name for this period. They call it the invisible decade. This is the absolutely critical window, a 10 to 20-year stretch where the biological machinery of aging really kicks into gear silently at a molecular level long before you ever feel a single effect.
This timeline, it just reframes the whole story, doesn't it? What we might diagnose as, say, mild cognitive impairment around age 65 didn't just pop up out of nowhere. The molecular groundwork was likely being laid way back around age 45. 45! That's when most of us feel like we're still in our prime. The problem has literally been brewing for 20 years.
So to really get why this happens, let's just look at the brain itself for a second. It's incredibly efficient. It makes up just a tiny 2% of our total body weight. But here's the kicker. Despite its tiny size, that little 2% organ burns through a massive 20 to 25% of our body's total energy. It is a high-performance engine that literally never shuts off. And, like any high-performance system, it just accumulates wear and tear faster. So here's the crucial part. How quickly this wear and tear compounds isn't mainly about the genes you were born with. It's about modifiable environmental lifestyle factors, the stuff we can actually control.
So what are these environmental drivers that are speeding up the wear and tear? Well, the source material calls them the 4 enemies of your brain. Let's take a look.
It really boils down to these 4 things. These are what shape the biological environment your brain has been swimming in for decades. Chronic low-grade inflammation, poor sleep, metabolic instability, and a really surprising one, predictability. Let's break down that first one, inflammaging. This isn't the kind of inflammation you feel when you sprain your ankle. It's more like a silent, subclinical fire that never quite goes out. Just think about the cumulative effect of a diet high in processed foods or years and years of chronic stress. It's that kind of constant low-level irritation that quietly accelerates damage. It's now considered one of the core mechanisms in all of aging neuroscience.
The second enemy? Poor sleep. And we're talking specifically about a lack of deep sleep. This is when your brain's waste clearance system, it's called the glymphatic system, kicks in. It's like the nightly cleaning crew that flushes out all these toxic proteins. Getting less than 6 hours a night, that's linked to a staggering 27 to 30% higher risk of accelerated decline. That's a huge number. The final 2 enemies are really tightly connected. You've got metabolic instability, so think insulin resistance, poor blood sugar control. That stuff directly harms the hippocampus, your brain's memory center. And then there's predictability. A life without novelty, without new challenges, it causes your neural networks to become super efficient, but also really rigid. And then rigidity is an early sign of aging. This is why learning a new skill is just so powerful. It forces your brain to break out of that rigid pattern.
Okay, so this brings us to a major, major turning point in how scientists are starting to think about this whole problem. The old model was basically that cognitive decline meant our neurons were being permanently destroyed, just gone. But what if something else is actually happening? This really shows the paradigm shift. The old idea, right, was that neurons were just gone forever. Poof. But the new frame suggests that, at least in the early stages, certain enzymes are actually just silencing key genes related to memory. It's like they hit the mute button. The capacity isn't destroyed, it's just turned off. Just think about that for a second. This is a profound change in perspective. If some of our cognitive abilities aren't destroyed, but they're just turned off, well, that becomes a fundamentally different problem to solve. It shifts the entire focus away from irreversible loss and toward potential restoration. It's a game changer. So, with all this in mind, what can we actually do about it? Let's cut through all the hype and look at the interventions that have the strongest scientific evidence for protecting our cognitive health. So what really moves the needle? The crucial thing to get is that not all advice is created equal. Aerobic exercise has, by far, the strongest evidence. A big reason why is because it boosts a protein called BDNF, which is basically like fertilizer for your brain cells. But look at this. Sleep is listed as a prerequisite. This is so key. If you are not sleeping well, no other intervention can fully do its job. You're just building on a shaky foundation.
Okay, finally, we have to ground all of this in a dose of reality. Because while so many of these factors are in our control, there are some biological realities that we just can't change.
Genetics do play a role. For about a quarter of people with European ancestry, carrying a gene called APOE4 significantly increases the risk of Alzheimer's. Having one copy can triple your risk, 2 copies can increase it by up to 12 times. Now, lifestyle changes can absolutely help, but they don't just erase this genetic predisposition.
And this really is the bottom line. 30 years of accumulated damage from inflammation, from poor sleep, creates stable, long-lasting changes in your biology. Interventions can slow the decline and may even restore some function, but they can't completely reset a trajectory that's been set in motion for decades. And look, this isn't meant to be discouraging at all. It's meant to create a sense of urgency.
And that leaves us with this one powerful personal question. The biology of brain aging, it doesn't wait for us to be ready. It doesn't wait for a convenient time to start. So the real question isn't if you should act, but when. Knowing what you know now about that invisible decade, at what point of the trajectory are you choosing to intervene?